My husband's family secretly rewrote our prenup behind my back, and when I finally discovered what they planned to do to me if he died, I realized my marriage was never safe. I found out my husband's family had been passing around a rewritten version of our prenup like it was already done, like I had signed off on it, and when I finally saw what they planned to do to me if he died, I realized my marriage was never safe, not because my husband is cruel in obvious ways, but because he let his family build a trap while he kept smiling at me like everything was fine. I am Lumen, I am in my 30s, I have been married to my husband, Oren, for a few years, no kids, we both work, we live in a house that feels like ours, but the kind of ours where his family still acts like they have a key to every door. Oren's family is not loud in the way that makes you spot them immediately, they are loud in the way that looks like competence, like they always have a plan, they always have paperwork, they always have a connection, they talk about legacy and protecting the family and doing things properly, and if you do not come from that kind of family you assume it is just old-fashioned. Oren grew up in that. His relatives treat money like identity, and their businesses like religion, and they all talk in this careful polite tone that sounds respectful until you notice it is always arranged so they are the authority. When Oren and I got engaged, his family pushed hard for a prenup, and I did not fight it. I make my own income, I am not trying to take anyone's business, I am not trying to be anyone's villain, so I agreed, but I insisted on my own lawyer reviewing it and I insisted we sign it correctly, because I have watched too many people assume paperwork is just paperwork until it is not. The original prenup was not fun to sign, but it was clear. It said what his separate assets were, what mine were, how things would be treated, and it included a section about death that basically said we would each have certain rights unless we waived them in writing, and the attorney I hired at the time was very blunt that any change later would still have to be agreed to by both spouses and properly signed, because you do not just edit a contract and pretend it counts, both spouses have to consent to modifications and sign them, usually with the same kind of formality as the original, often notarized, which I remember because it made me feel calmer at the time. That is the part that makes what happened now feel so unreal, because the whole point of doing it formally was so nobody could pull something behind my back. Oren has a chronic heart condition. It is managed. It is not an emergency every day, but it is real. It is the kind of thing where you go to regular follow-ups and you pay attention, and it is the kind of thing that makes his family act like I am a temporary occupant in his life rather than a spouse, because they have always treated his health like a reason they get more control. A few months ago, Oren had a scare, not the worst possible outcome, but enough that he was kept overnight for observation, and that overnight changed the tone in his family immediately, because the next day his mother started showing up with a folder, his aunt started making calls, and his older brother started talking about getting Oren's affairs in order like Oren was not sitting right there. Oren hates conflict. He is the type who thinks if he stays quiet long enough, tension will evaporate, so he did what he always does. He let them speak. He nodded. He told me later they were just worried, and I tried to be compassionate because a health scare shakes people. Then the little weird things started happening, not dramatic, just unsettling. His mother asked me what our homeowner policy looked like she needed to know. His aunt asked if my name was on the deed. His brother asked if I had access to Oren's business accounts, and every question was framed as practical, but I kept feeling like I was being audited. I told Oren it made me uncomfortable, and he did that gentle dismissive thing he does. He told me they are just planners. He told me it is not personal. He told me they like to be prepared, and I tried to accept that, because I did not want to become the spouse who sees enemies everywhere. The actual discovery happened because of a building, not because I snooped on a phone, not because I stalked a group chat, not because a lawyer called me with a reveal. It happened because I had to pick up a document at a courthouse records office, and Oren's family forgot that the world has neutral clerks and public counters and paper trails that do not care about their story. Oren has a small dispute with a contractor, nothing crazy, but it required a certified copy of something filed months earlier, and Oren asked if I could pick it up because he was working late, so I went to the county records annex. It is the kind of place that shares a building with building permits and tax maps. You take a number, you wait under buzzing lights, and you listen to people argue softly about paperwork. When my number was called, I went up, gave the clerk the case number Oren texted me, and the clerk pulled the file and asked me to confirm my relationship because the case had multiple filings, and I said I was his wife, and she nodded and started printing. Then she asked if I wanted copies of the other attached documents as well, because sometimes people request the full packet, and I said sure, because I assumed it was just routine, and she handed me a stack that included something I did not recognize, a notarized addendum, attached to a copy of our prenup. My first thought was, that cannot be ours, because our prenup was in our safe at home and we had never amended it. The addendum had a title line that referenced an amendment, it had Oren's name, it had my name, it had signatures, and it had a notary stamp, and I stood there at the counter feeling my pulse spike, because the signature line for me looked like my name, but not like my hand, not like the way I sign when I am actually present. The clerk asked if I was okay because my face apparently did something, and I told her I needed to sit down, and she pointed to a chair, and I sat there with that packet on my lap like it was something that could bite. I read the addendum, and the words made my stomach twist, because it rewrote the death section completely. It stated that if Orrin died, I would waive rights to any interest in the house, waive rights to certain accounts, and accept a limited payout that would be held and administered by a family trust with his brother as trustee. And it included language that I would vacate the home within a short period and that personal property in the home could be inventoried and removed by the trustee for distribution. It was written like I was a temporary guest, like the moment Orrin died I would become a nuisance to be cleared out, and the part that made my hands go cold was the trustee language, because it meant his brother would control what I got, when I got it, and what I was allowed to keep, and if you have ever met Orrin's brother, you know what that would look like. It would look like me pleading for my own furniture while being treated like a problem. I also recognized a phrase in the addendum that Orrin's mother uses constantly, a specific way of saying for the good of the family, and seeing it in a legal document made me feel like I was watching their private family language become a weapon. I called Orrin immediately, and he did not answer, and I sat there in that chair staring at the notary stamp, because the notary stamp made it feel official, like someone outside the family had participated, and I kept thinking, how could this exist without me? I took photos of every page right there, quietly, no scene, and I asked the clerk, calmly, how this was attached to the contractor dispute file, and she told me it was submitted as part of a separate filing that referenced Orrin's estate planning package in a different matter number, and the systems cross-linked it because of overlapping names, which meant someone had actually filed it somewhere. It was not just a draft, it was in the building's records. I left the annex shaking, I sat in my car, and I did what I never do. I called the notary name listed on the stamp, because notary stamps include commission identifiers and often a business line, and the notary answered and sounded confused at first, then cautious, and told me she could not discuss clients, and I told her my name is on a document she notarized, and I need to know when and where I supposedly signed it. The notary paused, then said she would need to check her journal entries, because she keeps a journal of notarizations, and she asked me to email the document image, and I refused to email it because I did not want copies floating around. I told her I could bring it in person or read the commission number and date, and she finally said the notarization happened at an office suite where she does mobile appointments for a legal services firm, and she told me the date, relative to Orrin's hospital. Scare. I was not there that day. I was at work. I had receipts for where I was. I had time clock logs, and I felt the sick certainty that my name was put on something without me being present. I got home and waited for Orrin, and when he walked in he looked tired and normal, and seeing him normal made me feel furious, because I had just learned my life could be erased with paper while he kept living like we were fine. I put the packet on the table and told him to explain, and Orrin's face drained of color. He stared at the pages like he was reading a different language, and he told me he did not know what that was. He told me he never asked for an amendment. He told me he never signed anything without me, and he sounded genuinely shocked. Then he did something that made me realize how deep the family control went. He immediately started defending the idea even while denying the act. He said maybe his mom was just trying to protect him. He said maybe his brother was just making sure things were organized. And I remember hearing him talk and thinking, do you hear yourself? You are arguing for their motive before you even confirm the facts. I asked him if he had met with a notary after the hospital scare, and he admitted his brother drove him to an office to sign estate planning documents because they said it was urgent. He said he thought it was just a standard update to his will, because they kept telling him the hospital scare meant he had to be responsible. I asked him if I was invited, and he said no. He said his brother said it would be easier if it was just them, and Orrin said it like he just realized how bad it sounded. I asked him if he signed any document with my name on it, and he said he did not think so. Then he hesitated, and that hesitation made me feel like I was about to be sick, because it meant he had signed a stack without reading, which is exactly what his family counts on. I told Orrin, calmly, that prenups cannot just be rewritten without both spouses agreeing and signing, and that if my signature was forged or obtained improperly, it could be fraud, and Orrin flinched at the word fraud like it offended him, not because it was wrong, but because it made his family look like criminals, and I realized he still could not accept the shape of what they did. That night he called his brother, and he put the call on speaker because I demanded transparency, and his brother answered with that smooth voice he uses when he is trying to sound calm and superior. Orrin asked him about the addendum, and his brother started talking fast, saying it was just a draft, it was just a contingency, it was just to protect the family estate, and then he let something slip. He said they had already had it notarized to save time, and I felt my whole body go cold, because drafts do not get notarized and filed unless someone intends to use them. I asked his brother, through Orrin because I was not going to get pulled into a direct shouting match, how my signature got there, and the brother said something that made me understand exactly what kind of people I married into. He said it was not forged. He said I signed things all the time. He said I must have signed it without paying attention, and he said it like he was describing a harmless trick, like it was normal to slip a document into a stack and get a spouse to sign without understanding. Oren went quiet, and I watched him processing, because either his brother was lying or his brother was admitting to manipulation, and both were poison. I told Oren I was leaving the house for the night, not moving out, just leaving because my nervous system was screaming, and I went to a 24-hour co-working space I have access to through work, not a hotel, not a friend's house, a quiet building with desks and printers, and I sat there with a notebook writing down everything I remembered, the date on the notarization, the annex clerk's explanation, Oren's admission about signing estate documents without me, and I felt like I was building my own survival file. The next morning I called my original prenup attorney's office, and they could not give me advice without re-establishing representation, but the intake person confirmed something basic. Amendments to prenups generally require both parties to consent and properly sign, and if someone altered the document after signing or forged a signature, that is a serious issue that can invalidate the modification, and hearing that from a professional made me feel less crazy and more determined. When I confronted Oren again, he promised he would fix it, he promised he would confront his family, he promised he would revoke whatever they did, and I wanted to believe him, but here is the problem, even if Oren meant it, the fact it happened at all meant I was living in a marriage where my legal safety could be modified without me, and the people capable of doing that were people who had access to my home, my routines, and my husband's fear about his health. The worst part was reading that vacate the home language again, because it made me picture a future where Oren is gone and I am grieving and his brother is at my door with an inventory list and a timeline, and I realized I would not just be grieving my husband, I would be fighting for my right to exist in my own life. So that is where I am. I have a prenup addendum on file somewhere with my name on it that I did not knowingly sign. My husband says he did not know. His brother admits they had it notarized and he implies I signed without reading. And I am sitting here looking at my marriage like it is a building that has been quietly declared unsafe without my consent. Update 2 weeks later. 2 weeks is not a long time, but it has been long enough for me to see how Oren's family operates when they get caught, and it has been long enough to see what Oren does under pressure, which is mostly freeze and hope someone else handles it. The day after my original post situation, Oren took a day off work, which he never does, and he said he was going to his brother's office to demand answers, and I told him he was not going alone, because that is how they control him, they isolate him, then they flood him with paperwork and urgency until he signs. So we went together, not to a family home, not to a restaurant, but to his brother's office suite, a leased space above a shipping insurance agency, the kind of building with a shared lobby and a receptionist who looks like she has heard too much. Oren's brother, Sayer, greeted us like we were there for a casual meeting. He offered water, he smiled, he tried to control the tone, and I watched Oren shrink slightly just being in the room, like his body remembered childhood rules. Sayer pulled out a folder immediately, like he had prepared exhibits, and he started talking about estate protection, about keeping Oren's assets in the bloodline, about making sure I would be taken care of in a reasonable way, and he kept using the word reasonable, which in their family means, the amount we allow you. Oren interrupted and asked why the addendum existed, why it was notarized, why it was in a public records packet, and Sayer leaned back and acted offended. He said it was never supposed to be filed in that way. He said it must have been attached by mistake. He said it was a protective measure, and he said they did it because Oren was scared after the hospital incident and needed someone to step up. Then Sayer did something that still makes me angry. He turned toward me and told me I should be grateful, because if Oren died, I would still get something, and he said it like he was describing charity, not a marriage. I asked him directly how my signature got on it, and he smiled, then he gestured toward Oren and said Oren signed it, and I said my signature is not Oren's signature, and Sayer's smile tightened, and he said maybe I am misremembering, maybe I signed it at home, maybe I signed it when I was tired. Oren asked Sayer if he had watched me sign it, and Sayer hesitated, then said he did not need to, because it was handled, and Oren's face changed, because that was the first time Sayer admitted, without admitting, that I was not there. Oren demanded Sayer produce the notary journal entry, and Sayer's expression flickered, and he said the notary has a journal, not him, and he tried to redirect to the bigger picture, which was their favorite move, zoom out so the details disappear. I pulled out my own notes, and I told Sayer the notarization date was a day I can prove I was not present, and Sayer finally lost a bit of his composure. He told me I was being dramatic, he told me Oren's health was serious, he told me family has to protect itself, and he said it like I was the threat, not the person whose signature was being copied. Oren told Sayer he wanted it revoked immediately, in writing, with proof filed wherever it needed to be filed, and Sayer said it is not that simple, and that is when I realized what Oren had not fully understood yet. You cannot just revoke a forged document by asking nicely, you have to treat it like what it is, a legal problem that requires formal correction and possibly legal consequences, because fraud does not dissolve because someone feels sorry. On the way out of the office, Oren was quiet, and I asked him if he knew his brother was capable of this, and Oren said he did not think his brother would ever do something illegal, and I told him his brother already did something illegal or at minimum unethical, because my signature is on a notarized document I did not sign, and Oren rubbed his forehead like he was trying to push the truth back into his skull. That week I hired my own attorney again, not my old one, a new one recommended through a legal clinic referral list, someone who specializes in marital agreements and estate planning overlap, because the thing that terrified me most was not just divorce, it was the death planning aspect, because the addendum was clearly designed for the moment Oren died, when I would be least able to fight. My attorney explained that post-marriage agreements and prenup modifications generally require both spouses' agreement and proper signing, and that a forged signature or fraudulent procurement can be grounds to invalidate the agreement, and she told me to stop discussing details with Sayer directly, because anything I said could be twisted later. We also requested copies of everything filed that referenced the addendum, which meant going back to the records annex, pulling a full certified packet, and paying for copies, which felt surreal because my life had become a series of certified packets. The certified copies confirmed something worse than I expected. The addendum was attached to an estate planning affidavit filed in connection with a family trust update, which meant it was not just a draft floating in someone's desk. It was used as a supporting document for a trust structure, which is exactly how they plan to enforce it, not by arguing with me later, but by having an entire system ready to treat me as someone who already waived rights. This is where Oren's mother entered the story openly, because she heard I hired an attorney, and she called Oren in tears, claiming I was attacking the family, claiming I was trying to take their legacy, claiming I was stressing Oren's heart, and Oren started spiraling, because his mother knows exactly how to press that button. She uses his health as a leash, and I watched him start apologizing to her, apologizing for me getting a lawyer, which was insane, and I told him to stop apologizing for me protecting myself. Oren's mother then invited us to a family gathering at their private event room at a community cultural foundation, not a home, not a restaurant, a rented room with a long table and framed donor plaques on the wall, and she framed it as a sit-down to clear the air, and Oren wanted to go, because Oren is addicted to the idea of clearing the air. My attorney told me not to go without her, so she came with me, not speaking much, just present, and the look on Oren's mother's face when she saw a lawyer sitting at that table told me everything. They expected me to be isolated and embarrassed, not supported and documented. Oren's mother started with a speech about family, about protecting Oren, about how they have seen spouses ruin men's legacies, and she kept talking while looking at my lawyer like she was trying to intimidate her, and my lawyer sat quietly taking notes, which I found oddly calming. Then Oren's mother admitted something in a sideways way. She said they had to move quickly after Oren's hospital incident, because if something happened, chaos would follow, and she said they could not risk me making decisions in grief that hurt the family structure, and I felt my stomach turn, because she was openly saying that if Oren died, she assumed I would be a problem to manage, not a wife to support. My lawyer asked one question, calm and sharp. She asked whether I was present for the signing of any addendum to the prenup, and Oren's mother blinked like she did not expect direct questions. Then she said she did not remember. Then she said she believed I had agreed, and my lawyer asked if she had witnessed my signature, and Oren's mother said no, but she said Oren would never let anything unfair happen to me, which was hilarious in a dark way because Oren had already let it happen by staying passive. Sayer then tried a new tactic. He slid a new document across the table, an agreement he claimed would replace the addendum, and he said it was a compromise. He said it would guarantee me a payout and allow me to stay in the house for a bit longer if Oren died, and he said it like he was negotiating my widowhood terms while Oren sat there alive. My lawyer told them we were not discussing compromise until they addressed the fraudulent document, and she asked for the notary's journal entry and identity verification logs, and Sayer's face tightened, and Oren's mother started crying again, saying this was cruel, saying Oren's health could not handle conflict. That meeting ended with nothing resolved, but it exposed something that mattered. They were not sorry, they were just angry they were caught. 2 days later, the notary finally called my attorney back, not me, because my attorney had sent a formal request, and the notary confirmed she notarized a signature for a person presenting as me, using an ID that matched my name, and the notary's journal had a thumbprint entry, which is something some notaries record depending on jurisdiction and practice, and the thumbprint did not match my records when compared to my own verified prints from a prior background check I had for work, which is not a perfect science in casual conversation, but it was enough for my attorney to say we now had a serious identity fraud issue. That is when Oren finally broke. He sat on the edge of our bed and kept repeating that his family would never do that. Then he kept repeating that they must have been scared. Then he kept repeating that he did not want me to leave. And I realized Oren was still focusing on emotional reassurance, not legal reality. My attorney filed a formal notice to invalidate the addendum and demanded corrective filings removing it from the trust package. And she also advised we report the identity fraud, because forged signatures and fraudulent procurement are grounds to invalidate agreements and can carry consequences, and letting it slide would leave me vulnerable later if they tried to enforce it when Oren was not around to object. Oren begged me not to involve law enforcement, because he said it would destroy his family, and I told him his family already tried to destroy my safety, and Oren went quiet, and in that quiet I realized I was alone in the marriage in the way that matters. I was the only one willing to protect me. Final update 4 months later. 4 months later, the truth is clear, not because everyone confessed, but because the process forced reality into the open, and it also forced Oren to pick a side in a way he kept delaying until it was no longer optional. The identity fraud report moved forward faster than I expected, because once the notary journal and the ID issue were documented, it stopped being a family disagreement and became a records issue that touched multiple systems. The notary's office had to respond, the legal services suite had to provide appointment logs, and the records annex had to flag the filing as disputed pending review. Oren's family tried to backpedal immediately, not with apologies, but with excuses. They claimed it was a misunderstanding. They claimed someone used the wrong packet. They claimed the addendum was never meant to be used, but the certified copy showed it was attached to a trust update, and that could not be explained away as a casual mistake, because it required intentional submission. My attorney also pushed on the contract reality. Prenups and modifications require both spouses' consent and proper execution, and forging or fraudulently obtaining a signature can invalidate the agreement. And the point was not just, remove the addendum. The point was to make sure it could never be resurrected later in probate when I would be fighting a trust administrator who would pretend the waiver was valid. Oren finally met with his own independent attorney, not Sayer's recommended person, not the family attorney, his own, and that meeting changed him, because he came home quiet and pale and told me, in plain words, that his family's actions could have left him exposed too, because if they were willing to falsify my consent, they were willing to falsify his. And that was the first time I saw him understand this was not just about me feeling hurt, it was about a pattern of control that could swallow both of us. Oren then did something I did not think he was capable of. He signed a written instruction revoking his brother's role in any fiduciary capacity over his personal planning, and he changed his emergency contact and healthcare proxy to me with proper filing, not because it fixed what they did, but because it removed their access points. His mother reacted by sending a formal family letter to our home, delivered by a courier service, not an email, not a text, a physical envelope that looked official, saying they were disappointed in Oren, saying I was manipulating him, saying they would be pursuing their rights to protect the family legacy, and the moment I held that envelope I understood, they were never going to treat me as family, they were going to treat me as an infiltrator forever. The final resolution came through a court-supervised stipulation, not a big dramatic trial, because once the notary's journal discrepancy and appointment logs were in play, Sayer's attorney pushed for settlement. They agreed to a formal recorded withdrawal of the addendum from any filing, a written admission that I did not execute it, and an order preventing it from being used against me in any future marital or probate proceeding. There was also a separate disciplinary complaint process for the notary, and I am not going into the details of that, but the outcome was that the notary's role in that document chain was formally challenged and it was not brushed aside as a small mistake. After the stipulation, Sayer tried one last move. He offered Oren a new estate structure that would keep me comfortable but still keep the house in the family trust, and Oren finally told him no, not gently, not apologizing, just no, and Oren told him he would not have a relationship with anyone who tried to erase his wife with paperwork. That boundary is what I needed months earlier, and it came too late to feel safe. Because even though the addendum was neutralized, even though there were written protections and formal withdrawals, the fact remains that Oren's family sat in a room and planned how I would be handled if he died, and Oren let them access the process long enough for my name to be attached to a fake signature and a notary stamp, and that is not a small crack, that is a structural problem. So I made a decision that felt weirdly calm when it finally happened. I did not pack a suitcase and run. I did not do a dramatic move. I did not repaint anything. I did not start a new hobby. I did not take a road trip. I did one thing. I filed for legal separation with the intent to convert to divorce once the waiting period passed, because I needed a legal boundary that did not depend on Oren's courage holding steady when his family applied pressure again. Oren did not fight it. He cried. He begged. He promised he would cut them off forever. And I believed he meant it, but meaning it is not the same as being able to protect me when the stakes are highest. We finalized everything cleanly. The house was sold and proceeds divided under the original prenup terms, not their fake addendum. My attorney ensured my accounts and property were in my name with clean titles, and Oren signed acknowledgments that there were no other undisclosed documents controlling my rights. The last time I saw Oren's mother was at a formal document signing room at the records annex, not a courtroom, not a family home. She showed up because she still thinks her presence changes outcomes, and she stared at me while I signed, like she was waiting for me to flinch. I did not flinch. I signed, I took my copies, and I walked out into the afternoon without looking back.